It's becoming one of the hottest topics out there, genetically modified organisms using advances in biotechnology to change our food. The proponents of it say that it's a great thing. You get tastier food, you get more quantity of food because everything is bigger, which means more people can eat, which means fewer people starve. But is that really the entire story? Jeffrey M. Smith is the author of Seeds of Deception, which is the world's #1 best-selling book on the health dangers of genetically modified organisms. He is also the leading advocate promoting healthier non-GMO alternatives. In his book, Genetic Roulette, Jeffrey expertly summarizes why the safety assessments conducted by the Food and Drug Administration and regulators worldwide teeter on a foundation of outdated science and false assumptions, and why genetically modified foods must urgently become our country's top food safety priority. Jeffrey M. Smith, welcome to the Global Freedom Report.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. You know, every time I conduct an interview or do a story on GMO, I get real depressed. It seems like the food supply is being poisoned, not just with GMOs, but also with an endless stream of chemicals and preservatives designed to extend food shelf life. It's like anything is okay if it makes a profit. Now, are you going to depress me more today, or do you bring us some hope for better times?
I'm going to give you a sandwich, Brent, and my sandwich has hope on either side with some depressing news in the middle. I think it's important for your listeners to know just how dangerous the food is, and that's not a good topic, but it's something that we need to know. But I will give you very good news about what's actually happening, that we have a plan to end the genetic engineering of the food supply. We have shopping guides that help people avoid eating the GMOs, and we together can knock it out of the market by creating a tipping point of consumer rejection. So I think overall you're going to be more upbeat than previous discussions about GMOs.
Oh, good. I look forward to it. How did you get to be such an expert on genetically modified organisms? What did you do? What did you do to become such a staunch advocate of non-GMO food?
Well, you know, I just started interviewing scientists 15 years ago. I heard about the fact that GMOs were about to be introduced to our food supply and that the products of this infant science were going to be polluting our environment forever and changing our health, probably. And so I started interviewing scientists and converting their concerns into language that the layperson could understand. And as I started interviewing more and more scientists, I realized that they have very compartmentalized understandings in their particular areas, so I was bringing them information that other scientists had told me, and soon I was managing the whole range of information about the health dangers. And I've started giving lectures even to medical conferences where I've given them all over the world, and I've convinced medical organizations to condemn GMOs officially, and many, many doctors are now prescribing non-GMO diets based on the information that I have collected and presented. But the kudos really goes to the doctors and scientists who gathered the information and who decided to share it with the world.
Well, that is very encouraging. How have you been received in these lectures? It sounds like you've gotten some support, but have you run up against the PC machine that says that you're talking about things you shouldn't be talking about, or how have you been received in the lectures? Just very briefly.
Well, let's say in a talk to 250 physicians in Chicago a couple of years ago, I asked the group to rate themselves from 1 to 100 how vigilant they were at avoiding GMOs, and how many were 1 to 20, 20 to 40, etc. And most people were not very vigilant. After 26 minutes, after showing them pictures of damaged livers and testicles, describing the thousands of sick, sterile, and dead livestock, the damage to virtually every organ and system studied, the way that the FDA fast-tracked these without any required safety studies, I said, now rate yourself how vigilant you'll be next week at avoiding GMOs. How many people are low vigilance, 1 to 20? No hands went up. In fact, everyone in the audience except one ended up in the 80 to 100 category saying they were now going to avoid GMOs, and they swamped me afterwards at the table getting patient education materials, including non-GMO shopping guides. And these were physicians.
That is fantastic. My guest is Jeffrey M. Smith, author of Seeds of Deception, Genetic Roulette, and a whole lot of other stuff. And the topic is GMO. GMOs promise more food for everyone because they provide bigger livestock. I mean, it's going to solve the hunger problem. For the record, what's wrong with genetically modified seeds and foods and organisms?
Well, first of all, the concept that they're going to feed the world is actually a misleading concept drummed up by the PR agencies. The world experts, including the most comprehensive report on hunger, has said the current generation of GMOs have nothing to offer to feed the world, and the most comprehensive report on yields show that they don't actually yield. It's called failure to yield. The process of genetic engineering is fraught with unpredicted side effects, and the American Academy of Environmental Medicine has reviewed the animal feeding studies and come to the conclusion that they are linked to reproductive problems, accelerated aging, immune system problems, gastrointestinal disorders, and they said that every doctor in America should prescribe non-GMO diets to every patient. And we have compiled 65 health risks linking GMOs with all sorts of problems. Now, someday we may be able to safely manipulate the DNA of food for consumption, for health and better environment, but that day may be decades or centuries away. Most of the assumptions used as the basis for safety claims turn out to be false.
In other words, you're saying that the technology that we possess exceeds our wisdom as to what to do with the technology.
As well as our arrogance about what we think we can do with nature. You know, when the FDA was asked to review GMOs, the scientists, we now know because of documents released from a lawsuit, were uniformly concerned. They said GMOs might create allergens, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. They had urged caution and long-term study. But the FDA was under orders from the White House to promote the biotechnology industry, so they recruited Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney, to be in charge of their policy. While he was in charge, the policy said, no safety testing is necessary, no labeling is necessary, we can't see anything wrong with GMOs. Then he became Monsanto's vice president. Now he's the U.S. food safety czar. Monsanto, of course, is the large biotech company.
Gee, it's wonderful how their system of rewards and promotions works. In your book, Genetic Roulette, which, by the way, is a fantastic title, you write of 65 specific health dangers linking GMOs in food to toxic and allergic reactions, infertility, and damage to virtually every internal organ studied in lab animals. How is it possible that so much danger from GMOs is completely missed or disregarded by government regulators, if not in the U.S., then elsewhere in the world?
Well, it's amazing how coordinated the attack team is around the world when any scientist discovers problems. Back in 1998, when a scientist who was actually given a grant by the UK government to figure out how to test for the safety of GMOs, when he found out that GMOs were unsafe, he was fired from his job after 35 years, silenced with threats of a lawsuit. When his gag order was lifted by an order of parliament, he was still attacked, and yet that created a tipping point of consumer rejection in Europe after 750 articles raised the question about GM safety, and within a single week, virtually every major food company committed to stop using GM ingredients. So the biotech industry has committed to not let anyone else speak this way, and so when someone discovers problems, they swarm in, distort or deny the evidence. Like, for example, Dr. Irina Ermakova, senior researcher in the Russian Academy of Sciences. She fed GM soy to female rats, and they got pregnant 2 weeks later, and more than half of their babies died within 3 weeks. They were also smaller and could not reproduce. She was then told no more GMO research. She had samples stolen from her laboratory, documents burnt on her desk. And one of her friends tried to comfort her by saying, well, maybe the GM soy will solve the overpopulation problem.
You know, one of the things that I'm absolutely convinced out of my own research, is that governments and government bureaucracies, by their nature, are extremely limited in their ability to coordinate. That's why they're so inefficient. What you're telling me is that somewhere, someplace, there is an ability to have global coordination between differing governments on this one issue. That if there is, because in today's high-tech world, WikiLeaks and such are out there. How is it possible to keep such drastic, potentially drastic dangers to the technology? How is it possible to keep them so efficiently secret?
It's a good example was what happened in India recently. A citizen's petition went to the Supreme Court saying that the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee was just rubber stamping approvals and there should be a moratorium on GMOs. So the Supreme Court asked one of the top biologists in the world, Dr. Bhargava, to attend the GEAC and give a report. So after 10 months, he wrote his report and said that the citizen's petition was absolutely correct. Not a single GMO on Earth has been properly evaluated. It's basically a sham. They don't even look at adverse findings. And what turns out that the people in the GEAC all have links to the biotechnology industry. I'm told that their kids have free scholarships to the U.S., etc. And it's the same thing in Brazil, where the majority approves rubber stamp-wise all the GM crops, and they too have links to the biotechnology. And the same thing in Europe, where the members of the European Food Safety Authority, several of them actually work are members of associations designed to promote GMOs in Europe. And so it's not actually that there has to be coordination between governments. There's a tremendous coordination by the industry, particularly Monsanto, that has infiltrated governments. And I've talked to some of these regulators who are actually independent of that, and they describe the details to me and how successful Monsanto has been in creating this sense that GMOs are safe and marginalizing us who are calling for more science, and they call us non-scientific.
You have counseled leaders from every continent. What is the general attitude regionally and around the world concerning GMO seeds and foods? And I'm not talking about scientists here, because from some of the material I got on you, you have actually spoken with political leaders as well.